right. I don't believe fortunately for you, I didn't give you the an added painful experience of analyzing any Miami games or this season in general last year. But in looking at a roster that Mario Cristobal inherited, that was roughly a top 15 to 20 roster in the country, if you believe in the recruiting rankings, and then of course there are going to be growing pains. You have to build relationships. You have to install your offense, your defense. You have to change terminology, all those things. Let's start there, because you've been around football so long as a coach, and determining and being in those kind of situations where you've got to go through an install, for example. So can you give us a better idea of the lift that is to come in as a new head coach, coaching staff, and build relationships with players, relate to them, and then do all the nuts and bolts things that I just mentioned in regards to a structure and an organization?
Yeah, I mean, I've done it a few times, and come into situations that might not have been as successful as everybody thought maybe they could be or they should be. What's gone on? This place had this history or this background, whether that was in Florida, Oregon, or here in North Carolina. Um, just wondering, what's going on. So, I guess your first question, so how do you come in and decide what to do? Basically, there's a lot of guys that put up these really interesting, manuals about how to work the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, year, 2 years, 5 years. I mean, they have the whole thing worked out, right? And that's important. I mean, to know what you're looking for, what do you want in a job. But once you're there, some people think that it's a negative in a way that Nick Saban has the Alabama offense and the Alabama defense. But I get that at times there are people who will not want to take that job that you may want because they want to use their terminology. But people come and go so fast, both as players and as coaches, that I think it is important to have your thing. Like in your look, we're going to call when there's three receivers to one side and the back is the opposite of the three receivers, and the solo receivers say on the left, trips are to the right. The tight end is in but off the line. What am I going to call that? Well, Saban wants to call the same thing on offense and he calls it on defense and vice versa, right? So if you were a receiver and went to corner, or you brought in new coaches, or we're having a meeting, everyone's using the same language. The language part is really difficult. There's guys definitely use different language. I think that's why Mario Cristobal is so interested in hiring Josh Gaddis and Kevin Steele the first round, because they both had coached at Bama just like he had, and everyone he was hoping, I think, was going to be the same type of coach, using the same language. Obviously, it backfired in some instances there and in some capacities, but I think that was something he was thinking about and interested in, and I think that was smart. I mean, I think you want to have, a set language and a common language, and that's really important, whether that's in your version of marketing or somebody just asked a question about recruiting. How do you talk to players? Do you use a set language? Because if you're even in discussing things with recruits, what terminology are you using? And is it going to be the same by the time they're on campus in a year and a half or 2 years or a year, right? Because the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator may come and go, and you almost hope they do, right? I would almost hope that they do so well they're out of here in 2 years, right? I don't want, kind of like Rhett Lashley did really well, goes on and gets himself that head job he wanted. Great. He did well enough, right? And so I think that's the thing that you want. You don't want to see what happened with Gaddis, which is he's kind of a co-OC he's a co-OC to a head coach who's also an offensive coach. He's like one of five. That doesn't look good, right? But, Steele moved up to Bama. That's a familiarity thing for Nick Saban. Again, language. He wanted somebody with similar language. And when Sark and Lane went there to Alabama to be the OC, they used, and Bill O'Brien, they actually used Nick Saban's terminology, and next to it on the play sheet is what they call stuff. so that the players are hearing the right thing and your brain just doesn't have to like have a meltdown, because there is a lot that goes on with that. I mean, I want to yell out something real fast and you call it something different. You don't want to have that screw up in the language.